Hi, my name's Katie with Modern Textiles, and today we're going to go over the 4-at-a-time Flying Geese blocks. And later on in the video, I'm going to show you my favorite tool for trimming these blocks. So as you can see, I've got one larger, this is going to be our geese block. So if you are looking at your Flying Geese, this is going to be that inside triangle block. And I have 4 smaller squares, which are going to be the sky, essentially, if you will. So I've got this awesome phosphor fabric from Andover by Libs Elliott. I've got little mini starry from Ruby Star Society. So I've got my 4 sky pieces, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and each one of these, which I've already marked with my hair marker, but you can't see it very well. I'm going to go ahead, just use my friction pen here, and from corner to corner, I'm going to mark my diagonal line. And this is going to be what I use as my guide for sewing. All 4 of the diagonals drawn on here. I'm going to go ahead and just take my larger square and 2 of the smaller ones. I'm going to go ahead and put them right on the outside perimeter. Maybe it'd be easier for you to see right here on the dark background. I'm going to put them so they are lined up. If you want, you can withhold them just a hair. Not even, I wouldn't even go as a 1/16 of an inch. And then put another one on the diagonal, and you can see my line, might be a little tough for you to see overhead, lines up. I'm going to grab a couple of pins here and just make sure these are going to stay in place. And now I'm going to go ahead, and when I'm sewing, I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on either side of this line that I drew. So scant 1/4 inch just means your 1/4 inch but withheld just a hair. So you don't want to go down to an 1/8 inch. You don't want to be, too far away from that 1/4 inch. Just a hair smaller, so that way you've got a little bit of wiggle room to trim your Flying Geese when you're done. All right, now that I've got my 2 scant 1/4 inch seams running alongside that diagonal line, I'm going to go ahead, we're going to take these, move these pins over, and I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2 triangles apart. This is the first step of cutting, so there will be more after this. I'm going to cut right on that line that we drew previously. So now we have 2 of these. I'm going to go ahead and press my seam towards the sky of the block or towards the darker, whatever you prefer, but I typically like to press towards the sky here. I'm just going to use my pressing mat. All right, and now that I have 2 of these kind of, if you will, heart-shaped pieces here, I'm going to take the last 2 of my smaller squares, my smaller sky, and I'm going to go ahead, and here's my diagonal that I've drawn. I'm going to bring that, line it up to my outside lines, and then I want to make sure that that diagonal falls right at that center point of those 2 previous squares. So once again, I'm just going to pin that in place. Make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Repeat the other one. Once again, make sure that that diagonal line falls right on that center point there. And once again, I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch on either side of that drawn line, and then go ahead and we're going to repeat for both of these pieces. And now here we are with scant 1/4 inch seams sewn along each of the lines. I'm going to go ahead and repeat and just cut right on those drawn diagonal lines. Oops. So there's the first 2. And now I'm going to go ahead and press once again to this darker fabric, and then that way we'll have our 4 Flying Geese. All right, now that we have 4 Flying Geese, I'm going to show you the tool I like to use for trimming. I'm a pretty minimalist quilter when it comes to notions and things like this, so when I recommend a notion, to be honest, it's because I use it a ton in my sewing room. I actually have this thing called a wing clipper. So essentially, it's got multiple sizes. for trimming flying geese from 1 1/2 inch, 1 by 1 1/2 inch, all the way up to 5 1/2 by 10 1/2 for different flying geese sizes. There's wing clipper 2, different sizes, so just beware. I only have 2 specialty style trimming tools. This would be one of them for flying geese, and then I use a different one for half square triangles. That really, I recommend them because I really use them anytime I make these blocks. So if you're interested, I'll have a link down in the show notes. But yeah, let's go ahead and get these trimmed. So these are going to be 4 1/2 inch by 8 1/2 inch flying geese. So I've got, it's probably a little tough to see on here, I've got my 4 1/2 inch measurement right here, and then my 8 1/2. So when I go to line this up, I'm going to mark or have the point of my goose, if you will, hitting that X for the 4 1/2 inch, and then I want to make sure my perimeter of the rectangle is going to be on this 8 1/2 by 4 1/2 inch rectangle here. So it's very crucial that you keep that 1/4 inch measurement of your background fabric, so that way that's going to be allow for your trim or your seam allowance, and then you're not going to be cutting off the points of any of your geese. So you may have to just wriggle this around until it fits properly. You'll see that there's a nice 45 or I don't know, a diagonal line here that you'll want to use that on the diagonal of your geese. So right now I'm at my 4 1/2 inch is meeting that point. I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance to allow for, and then I'm following that 4 1/2 by 8 1/2 exterior line. So I trim it on both sides there. I clearly need to change out my blade. And then repeat. And now I'm just finding the 8 1/2 by 4 1/2, lining that up on the exterior lines, perimeter there. And then once again, making sure that that 1/4 inch seam allowance is staying put. Oops. And that way, you got your flying geese, or one flying goose. I'll repeat the trimming for the next 3. And there you have it. You have your 4 at a time flying geese. In the next video, I'm going to show you what strip piecing is.